So I'm Greg Kesich. I'm the editorial page editor at the Portland Press Herald Main Sunday Telegram, and I'm here with the Sunday columnist lineup: Bill Nemitz, Cynthia Dill, Alan Caron here in Portland's version of Trump Tower. It's one city center. We're here. We're close to the people, and we are ready to talk about. You're closer
now on the second
floor.
Yes,
we've moved down
all the time, getting closer to the people.
Right.
It's not the ivory tower anymore.
We used to be up on the fifth floor in a rarefied air, but now we're down closer to the food court. And so a lot of things going on this week. We're here recording this a day before the great inauguration of the 45th president. And but our own chief executive has been making news this week. And Bill, you wrote about Governor LePage.
I did. I've been waiting for years to draw the parallels between Governor LePage and Archie Bunker, and finally got my shot.
Yeah.
But, I think, what can you say at this point other than the fact that this man, I don't think is going to stop, as much as we wish he would, with these just completely out of nowhere pronouncements. That the NAACP should apologize to Northern white people for having to fight their war, that John Lewis needs a history lesson, and then he goes on to completely mischaracterize Ulysses S. Grant and Rutherford B. Hayes. I mean, at some point you wish the world could just ignore Paul LePage. Yeah. The problem is they don't. And he says something like this, it goes national, and here we are.
We wrote an editorial about this latest incident, and the internal debate that I had was, do we just ignore this guy? I mean, are we feeding this by calling attention to it? And it seemed like it came down to writing for the historical record. You know, this guy is saying this terrible stuff, and we've got to say something now. But when I read your column today, I kind of cringed when I thought about Archie Bunker, because that was, I grew up in the outer boroughs of New York in the 70s, and Archie Bunker was incredibly popular. Right. It was intended to be a very negative caricature of, to show people, expose to people what bigotry looked like, and people loved it.
Right.
And I think we see an element of that here.
He was not universally viewed as a satirical character.
No,
at all.
He was a hero.
Right. But I think we have the same thing here, obviously, where there are people who are going to listen to LePage and cheer on even remarks like this. And actually, that was the more fundamental point I was trying to make in the column, and that is that we're at a point where he can say something that is demonstrably untrue, and people like me, other people can point out. We can have historians at elite private colleges saying this is not true, and that just does not matter. And we're in this dilemma. We talked about it before. My feeling is twofold. Number one, you never stop pushing back on falsehoods. You just can't. And number two, that when these things go national, as this one quickly did, and the whole universe is talking about it, I think that here in Maine, we do have some obligation, some responsibility to demonstrate to the world that Maine is not in lockstep with this governor, and that there are people who disagree with them. So that's kind of where my bar is right now, in terms of ignoring it or paying attention to it.
I personally think, I'm sorry, Alan. No. I personally think that Governor LePage needs to be impeached. I think that the real test here is whether or not we're going to accept from our leaders sort of the knowing misrepresentation of facts for their own personal political gains. And if there was ever a misdemeanor of office, it seems to me a leader, purposely and knowingly, spreading falsehoods to gain political points. It should be completely unacceptable, especially because it's in conjunction with his administration losing millions and millions of dollars, whether it be for the women and infants, care because the DHHS, loses contracts, or the decertification of Riverview, just the fiscal mismanagement on top of the moral, just sort of landscape is really disturbing, and there needs to be a reaction. I think the reaction should be an impeachment.
But you don't think he will be impeached, do you?
I do. Unfortunately, I don't yet see the organization or the strength of the Democratic-led majority in the legislature. But it's still early. I mean, we'll see. There's still a lot of sort of groveling for powerful positions within the party and people trying to make statements. I don't see the organization, so I'm not optimistic that it'll happen. But in my view, that would be the appropriate response to Governor LePage.
You think, Alan?
I take a somewhat different position on this. I mean, I agree with what you said, Bill, about whenever he says blatantly false things, then we have to correct for the record and for those people who listen to him but also listen to others. But I think he's largely irrelevant. I mean, I think you have to really work hard to figure out what has he accomplished in the last 4 years that wasn't done. I'm not talking about within agencies where cuts have been made and things have been done within certain parameters. But what has he really accomplished after the first 2 years as governor? I don't see much, and I think he's just increasingly irrelevant, except when he makes outrageous statements that get him in the news.
But reflect on the state.
Absolutely. Right. And we won't know the true cost of all of this until he's gone, whenever that is, and the sooner the better. But I think all of this just accelerates his irrelevancy, really.
I think that you've hit the nail on the head as to why impeachment is, I don't think, going to happen. And it's simply because I think the legislature thinks it's much more politically expedient to ignore him in terms of the functioning of government, which they've done largely over the past several years.
And we'll see again with
just
this
go
new
on
budget.
and say we can keep the trains running without him, and so let's just ignore him. I think the fact that impeachment has been attempted and failed pretty miserably is also a disincentive for anybody to want to try it again.
Well, I think it failed under, it was a different legislature under different circumstances. We now have a new administration. We see this sort of contagion effect of the bully in office and getting elected saying false things. I mean, if we're going to make a statement about politics and what we want, it should be that this kind of inaction, whether he's not doing his job, is acceptable. And people, I think, need to understand that a vote to impeach LePage is perfectly within the realm of of options, and it's a step that's anticipated and envisioned in the Constitution, and it should be exercised. I mean, if we're going to draw the line at what is an acceptable leader, I mean, it'd be one thing if he was irrelevant. I don't think he is irrelevant. I think he's driving good people from public service. I think he's driving good people away from government, and he's showing by example that, hey, if you can be the biggest bully, you can get ahead.
See, I don't think most people think he's irrelevant. I mean, it might be people who understand how government works don't see him as playing a big role, but on both sides, people who love him and people who hate him think he's kind of the center of the show. And something like this, where if you listen to the tape, he brought it up.
Yes.
They didn't even ask him about John Lewis.
Right.
He brought out this whole crazy thing, and I hear a lot of Republicans, kind of smart people, defending this crazy idea that there's a historical basis that Republicans are the only ones who have done anything about civil rights, and anybody who says otherwise is just ungrateful, and I'm trying to argue it on that level. So he seems to have maybe he hasn't gotten a budget passed since 2011, but he has dominated the scene.
He sets a tone, and I
Yeah.
think that's the difference between looking at this pragmatically and looking at it holistically and saying, what is the tone of politics in Maine in 2017?
Yeah.
And a lot of that, the vast majority of that, is directly attributable to him. And I think I think it is. It's a climate thing, but so I think the legislators can ignore him, but for many reasons, the electorate can't.
Yeah. So one thing is 6 years in, it doesn't look like the Democrats have really come up with a way to respond to him. that's effective. Do you agree?
I do agree. I agree wholeheartedly. I think that there was a big mistake made under Speaker Eves, and I have a lot of respect for Mark Eves, and I think he is a good person, and this isn't personal, but I do think it was a mistake for him to remove himself from the impeachment process and go a legal route as opposed to staying in charge of the House and really leading the fight when LePage interfered with Mark Eves' employment, because that was a political move on LePage's part, and what it demanded, in my view, was a political response. And so I think that was a mistake. I think that a lot of these fights that the Democrats have picked with LePage, they've come out on the short end of the stick. They've done good things in terms of governing. They've come together and passed budgets and, prevented government from shutting down, and have taken steps to try to, shore up healthcare and do the things that they can do. But I think from the political view, from the eyes at home, judging on who's strong or not, the Democrats have yet to really demonstrate that they have a muscle that can be flexed.
Mm-hmm. And what would that be? I mean, what could they do?
Well, they could impeach him, and that's what they should do. I mean, really.
But they can't. I mean, they don't have the votes.
Short of that, though, when you see bills like the constitutional carry, the total NRA-sponsored bills. Now, the NRA, whether you're a hunter or not, the NRA is for the most part associated with the Republican Party, and the NRA appeared with Governor LePage in the signing of the bill. I mean, it was so closely aligned with the NRA. Now, the Democrats have the votes to prevent other NRA-backed bills from passing that have nothing to do with Maine's hunting culture, that have nothing to do with the Second Amendment. This is strictly an NRA-sponsored bill, and Democrats could prevent that from happening, but they don't. But I think they should.
Uh-huh. That's interesting. I mean, there's a lot of Democrats who will say that they support guns, and the rural Maine Democrats, Troy Jackson for one, has a very high rating with the NRA, and he almost lost his election this year, and he told us it was because he was being billed as a Portland liberal.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he can. If he's being billed, he needs to do the billing. I mean,
that was the attack on him, was he was a Portland liberal.
Yeah, well, the Democrats who lose have to stop blaming the Democrats who win. The Democrats in rural areas could perhaps look in the mirror and say, maybe I'm trying too hard to appease to the conservative base, that I'm not really making the case in terms of leadership. Now, majority of Maine people, I think, there's a dispute about guns, but in terms of the Democrats winning something, that's something in the House of Representatives that they could win. They could prevent an NRA bill from passing. And there's a handful of Democrats, and all they need to do is rein in those few handfuls and say, look, we need a victory. This is something that we can win. It's a national issue.
But that victory, they're achieving a victory by defeating something. And I think that's the story of the Democratic Party right now, is we can stop things here and there, but stopping things is not what you stand for.
Well, that's the role, though, of the opposition.
Right. Well,
but
that's what the opposition does.
Obama's great legacy is that the recession would have been much worse.
Oh, come on now. We can't compare the Obama legacy with the Maine Democrats.
No,
the
but you know what I'm saying?
Administration has done a significant amount of good work in terms of the economy. The accomplishments, in my view, are very lengthy under the Obama administration. I mean, whether it be from clean energy to international diplomacy to the recovery of the stock market to diversity in the workforce to worker protections. I mean, the Obama administration has a long list.
You're not going to mention the ACA?
Yeah, sure. The insuring of 80 million people. I mean, the Democrats have done a lot in Washington.
Yes, but I would say that they don't have something that's comparable to Republican list of issues like smaller government, less taxes.
Those aren't issues; they're sound bites.
But it's a governing philosophy that everybody knows, and every single person, every single Republican adheres to. And
they say it, but they don't do it.
It drives all kinds of policy choices that they make.
But it resonates, and that's the reality that we live in today, is that sound bites resonate. A lot of people, a lot of voters never get past the sound bite if they get to it at all.
I mean, just sound bites, Alan? Or you think?
Yeah.
Well, I think if the soundbite is about what people want to be talking about,
precisely,
and where they want action to happen, then the soundbite has a great effect. And if it's a soundbite about things that people don't care about, then it doesn't have an effect. And, you know, if the original question was how do Democrats counter Paul LePage, I mean, what do people want? They want jobs and they want change in government. It's pretty simple. Gun control, all those issues are pretty far down the list. And if Democrats don't develop candidates and a voice and a message that is first about jobs and second about change in government, I don't see how winning some legislative battles changes that fundamental dynamic. Well, I just don't think it does.
Yeah, I just think that Democrats, you asked how could Democrats win? I mean, the gun issue was one of the leading issues in the national election. I mean, Hillary Clinton was the first presidential candidate to bring up gun control. We have a national movement by Bloomberg and others to roll back, crazy gun laws and to instill instead rational gun safety laws. A lot of people do care about it. All the polling shows that. And the fact is that the Republicans pass these bills through the legislature, and the Democrats do, I think, unfortunately, what you say, which is, well, most people don't care about this, so I'm going to cave and instead try to talk about jobs and the economy. But I just think that they have to do both. You can chew gum and walk at the same time. You can have a message about the economy, which I think Democrats have. They have to reduce it to sound bites perhaps, but they have a message. But they can also win on some of these other issues that are really hot button issues. Like, I'm sorry, gun violence in this country is out of control. A lot of people really care about it, and they want people to do something. Democrats could do that.
I have a couple of really good friends who ran for the legislature in rural districts, one in Caribou, one in Franklin County. Good progressives. They knew that if they were on the wrong side of the gun thing, they were dead to begin with, figuratively, politically, and otherwise. So they took a more nuanced, soft position, protector. They still got killed. Yeah. They got killed because people don't believe Democrats have the first idea of what to do about the economy. That isn't sharing more equitably, but job creation. I mean, I know the programs and policies and all of the white papers and all this stuff, but the public doesn't buy it. They just don't buy it from Democrats. They believe, I think, large swaths, I'm going to generalize as you have about gun control, they believe that Democrats are about government, making government bigger, protecting government programs and policies.
Yet they buy increasing the minimum wage in a referendum.
That's right.
Well, and 3 million people more voted for the Democratic candidate in the national election than the Republican candidate.
Here in Maine, I mean, take the minimum wage and look at what happened at the polls pretty decisively. Yeah. And then the question becomes, who owns that? Whose win is that? Is it the Republic? No, it's not the Republic. Was it the Democrat? No, I'm not sure it's the Democrats' win either. It's almost like it's somewhere in the middle. And that's the kind of issue that traditionally should be immediately and forever branded a Democratic issue. This is something that they want. This is something they're pushing for. It's something that should get passed at the polls, and it did. So why isn't there this sense that the Democrats won this one? I'm not feeling it. Mm-hmm. I'm feeling like the people of all stripes finally said, this is unfair.
I think that's definitely, the Maine
we're
people...
We're impatient with the legislature.
Yeah. Right. The Maine People's Alliance is obviously largely credited for the referendum question. They're the ones who sponsored it, and that is typically a left-leaning associated with the Democratic Party. But I think one of the reasons why the Democrats don't get credit for a lot of the work that they do is because kind of what I'm witnessing right now is a lot of jawboning about how bad the Democrats are. Sort of like you said, most of the people think that Democrats are a certain way. It's like, well, when the facts don't bear that out, we're sort of, in other words, we are reinforcing this fake news by talking about, I'm just saying that this is a problem Democrats have.
Which major Democratic candidate for governor has led with a jobs plan, led with it, and resolutely stuck with it in the way that Bill Clinton advised all Democrats to do, that it was the economy is stupid. It was pretty good advice. But I don't see it. We could barely define the Democratic plan for the economy. We could barely do it. Public works spending, which people will support, they always have, but if that's your main thrust of how we're going to grow the economy is public works spending, most people don't fit in that category. They don't work equipment, they don't have shovels, they don't. So, I mean,
to play devil's advocate on that, what about the false promise, on the other hand, that we're going to bring the mills back?
I know,
sure,
exactly.
Yeah. And both parties have done that,
right?
Tax
for
cuts.
50 years.
When that is the message that resonates, it's very difficult to combat that.
Exactly.
Sure.
Because what you're trying to do is speak truth to falsehood, and when falsehood sounds good, a startling segment of the population doesn't really want to hear the truth.
Yeah,
that's
they want to make America great again.
Yeah, look, that's a dilemma for Democrats. There's no question about it.
Because they're truth tellers.
Yeah. Although, look, Democrats have been, every Democratic administration has promised to bring back manufacturing jobs in my lifetime, every one of them. And they had no more effect on whether we'd have more manufacturing jobs than any one of us in the state. But they resolutely promised it, and people, particularly in mill towns in northern Maine, every year bought it.
Well, I just think that the Democratic economic message in the last gubernatorial election was actually a strong one, and that we're kidding ourselves if we think that Elliott Cutler's role in the race didn't tip the scales one way or the other. I mean, to me, they had an economic message, and they had a candidate, obviously, who didn't win. But there are other factors that come into play. But of course, it's all about, it is about jobs and the economy. And the economy under the LePage administration has stunk. I mean, we have like the lowest job growth. We have more people dying than are being born. People are not being, attracted to Maine. Increased student debt. The wage stagnation, infant mortality, child hunger. I mean, it's a total dismal failure. And yet LePage walks around like he's, the big guy on campus, saving us from the bad Democrats. It's like, what have you done for me lately?
Mm-hmm. It doesn't seem to come back at him. It just feeds into his narrative that the place is terrible. Things are terrible. See, all the mills are leaving. Nobody ever blames him for
no, it's energy
leaving.
Costs. It's whatever
they wouldn't do, and that's why
there are many targets to which he deflects, and thereby escapes having to take any responsibility for himself. I mean, it's quite the dilemma for anybody who is trying to put forward a realistic, truthful economic message. The first thing you have to do is get people's attention. Yeah. And that gets back to our earlier discussion. Right now, Paul LePage, and this is where he is relevant, he's got everyone's attention.
Whenever he wants
and it's very difficult for anyone to find any more oxygen in the room with which to put forth a counterbalancing message right now.
Which, the same, Trump is the same way.
Right.
And I'm wondering if there's anything that Democrats in Washington can learn from the Maine experience. Now, you were in the legislature in 2011, and the Democrats' leadership had a kind of a we're gonna work with them. We're in the minority, and we're gonna present nuances, but we are going to I think Emily Kane said we're not going to be the party of no. We're going to be the party of yes, but and you were quite a dissenter of that strategy. You had the anti-nepotism bill and some other bills. And so, what would you say to people in Washington now? I mean, how should you deal with a new administration like this?
All the bills that I proposed were not in personal attack on the winners of an election. They were actually policy-based bills. Like, I think it's important to have a nepotism policy in state government, and the bill that I had proposed would have only, been effective after LePage had left. It wasn't even about LePage personally. But I think as an opposition party, you have to fight bad ideas with good ideas and stand up on principle. I mean, what was discouraging for me when I was in the legislature is it seemed to be this cowering away from fundamental principles, like helping pass these tax cuts that obviously we're not going to do anything to jumpstart the economy, because we know from previous experience that when you cut people's taxes at the top, it doesn't trickle down to the mill towns. It just doesn't. And on the other hand, the LePage administration was so quick to cut all these deals, corporate welfare, all over the second congressional district, whether we were accepting responsibility for the toxic Dolby, wastewater, cutting deals with Kate Street Capital that were just totally ridiculous. But it was just hard to get the Democrats' attention. They were so afraid. They just had lost an election. They lost their head.
And is it harder when you're the party of government to just say no and risk a shutdown?
I just think it's so much about the individuals involved. Like you just need a good group of people, hardworking, thinking people who can come together and come up with the best strategy. And so it's hard to do the broad brush. I mean,
so it looks like it's true. The Democrats in Washington say no whenever they can, play defense as much as they can. Or what if they were to come to Trump and say, "Look, we love your infrastructure idea, and we're going to give you Democratic votes so it'll pass both houses."
Republicans in Congress have already said not going to happen. They saw that move coming.
And how did they block it?
Same way they did with Obama.
They already have Trump saying, you remember the quote a couple of weeks ago, "I didn't know it was such a Republican." It was against. So they've already got him saying, this is a ways off in the future. That's code for
forget
no
about
way
it.
you're getting that through Republican House and Senate.
Yeah.
Come on. So I think the opportunities for Democrats to strike deals in those few areas where they would agree with Trump, which is helping working people in the middle class and doing the big infrastructure spending. Infrastructure is already off the table. The rest of it's going to be off the table as soon as any idea gets to the Congress, I think. I mean, I can't see Republicans in Congress embracing Democratic ideas they've been fighting for 8 years. I mean, it's just impossible to contemplate. Now,
like bargaining for prescription drug prices?
Well, yeah. I mean, every day Trump says something that Republicans have been fighting for 8 years. So this is going to be a show, folks. Get the popcorn ready.
Yeah, and stay tuned for the midterm, because I think that's when these dynamics could change dramatically. And I think the surprise for many Trump supporters isn't necessarily going to come in the next 6 months. I think it's going to come 2 years from now. If there is as traditionally there would be, a Democratic swing in the midterm, and all of a sudden Trump, ever the pragmatist, starts doing deals with the Democrats. I mean, I think the first 2 years are going to be relatively stagnant, because the Republicans in Congress are far more interested in preventing Democratic achievement at the legislative level than they are in, actually getting any of these things done. So 2 years from now, I think you are going to have a real circus.
Well, and I think that goes to your question about whether or not Democrats should just oppose everything, and that's the question that takes place behind, the doors. Is that like, okay, are we going to oppose this, and therefore prevent some modest accomplishment on the other side to position ourselves better for the midterm elections, or are we going to try to cut a deal? My personal feeling is that they should only oppose things if they can accomplish something, if there's a reason for opposing it, whether it's to get a better position on something that they care about, to position themselves better strategically in some other deal, or just on principle, but to have some, not just oppose for opposition's sake like the Republicans did when Obama came in. I mean, I just think that is a real treasonous almost, to be under the oath to support a constitution and then just draw a line in the sand and say anything that person says I'm going to oppose. I think that's un-American.
Do you think Democrats should go to the inauguration?
Democratic members of Congress.
Yeah.
I support Shelley Pingree's personal decision to not go. If it was me, I probably would go, but that's one of those things that I think it's a peaceful protest in the American spirit and is not harmful and not disruptive of the Trump's celebration. So I think they should go if they want. At the same time, I totally support and respect anybody's position to not go, to make a statement in sort of solidarity with John Lewis.
I think it's one of those personal decisions. It's not that often that, members of Congress make a purely personal decision. And I think that's what we're seeing happen here, is that some people just cannot bring themselves to be a part of this ceremony. And so they're going to stay away. But as somebody noted on an interview I heard earlier today, there's no constitutional obligation for a congressman, woman, or a senator to attend the inauguration. It's really up to them.
Yeah. It seems like there's kind of a ratchet with these things, and once you slip by one click, it never goes back. Will we ever see another State of the Union where people are yelling at the president? I think we will,
Yeah.
Well, I've always been entertained by the parliamentary system of government.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Me too.
It would make C-SPAN a lot more fun to watch.
Naturally morph into one.
Right.
It seems like the Democrats are a little spooked right now.
Yeah.
Nationally. I mean, I don't think anybody's figured out what just happened, really. And it reminds me of the first year when LePage came in, that there were a lot of strong ideas about what Democrats should do, but there wasn't any cohesion. There wasn't any strategic, shared sense of, okay, this is how we got to pivot. This is how we got to change our message. This is how we win. And so I don't know how long that's going to go on, but it's going to affect the midterm elections as well on some level. They'll figure it out as they go along. But I think a lot of people are really elected Democrats in Washington in particular right now. They just got whacked. Yeah. And they don't quite understand by who or why. And there's going to be, everybody promises to do soul searching every time this happens. It's actually seldom done. It sort of goes to the habitual, I'm better at doing this, so I'll go do this. But if there isn't some real soul searching about what happened, it's, and it's just like, we got to find a fresh face. But the fresh face is going to say the same things. Ruh-roh. I mean, that's not going to work.
The other thing that you have to take into consideration here is the wild card. I firmly believe that things are going to happen in the next couple of months that none of us know are coming. I think that soon-to-be President Trump is going to be tested dramatically and early by players on the world stage who pretty much have been biding their time until he's in office, but won't want to waste much time to throw his administration into turmoil. So a lot of these political calculations could go right out the window if 3 or 4 months from now we find ourselves the victims of one or a series of attacks, and we have an administration, perhaps in part due to its failure to recognize the importance of a transition, is unable to cope with it. And then we have a national crisis of confidence, not a political one.
I agree with that. And the thing that concerns me most is Trump's persona, his way of operating as a business person and a deal maker is to employ bluster, threats, lawsuits, intimidation. Trying to work that stuff on an international stage with countries that really don't care about you very much. They don't want to make deals with you. Thank you very much. And if they could kill you, they would. And the sooner the better. Mm-hmm. I think that's, I agree with you.
You throw a provocation into that, and you're dealing with a very incendiary situation.
Yeah.
And my fear is that he's going, wait a minute, he just ordered a bombing run? We're going to take out what
against
launch
Steve
sites?
Wynn?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
He took out 3 casinos.
We're no longer dealing with this in the abstract.
Yeah.
As of Friday, January 20th, we are dealing with this very much in the reality.
Well,
and
it's gonna,
that scares the heck out of me.
Yeah.
It's going to be a real test of our system of checks and balances. I mean, people talk about the Constitution all the time. They're waving it around and, quoting the Second Amendment usually. But the Constitution has in place a system to check power, and clearly Trump's power has to be checked, whether it be by the Congress or the judiciary. I mean, we'll see. Hopefully he'll surprise us. Hopefully President Trump will be surrounded by people who influence him in ways that help the American people. I certainly hope so. But if for some reason he does go down the path that you've just described that are the source of your concerns, I would hope that either the Congress or the judiciary could see, their way to acting, as opposed to what's happening in Maine, which is everybody just sort of sits around and looks at Governor LePage and thinks, oh, there's nothing we can do. We'll just throw up our hands. We'll just do the budget without him. We'll just ignore all these racist comments. It's, I hope we do better at the national level.
And speaking of the national level, what are we thinking of Susan Collins' role?
It's
emerging?
big.
Yeah,
It's getting bigger.
Huge.
Yeah.
It's huge. I mean, it's in terms of Congress, it's going to have to be from the Republican side because the Democrats don't control anything. And the people I hear a lot from liberals who write letters to the editor who are very disappointed that she's not a liberal.
I know.
But she's not,
I know.
It's not a secret. She didn't,
Right.
she never has been, but she does seem to legitimately care about 85,000 people losing their health insurance overnight.
Absolutely. And women's reproductive rights.
And is doing everything she said she would do a month ago, which is she's expressed, her misgivings about repeal without a replacement. She has she introduced an amendment that was later withdrawn, but put a marker out that said basically I'm not going further than this. In terms of the speed. She's talked about introducing a bill that's been kicked around for a couple of times that everybody knows it's got options, but nobody really has talked about what those options are. But it's basically one of the options is it leaves the Affordable Care Act in place. And she seems to be, kind of putting some of the posts around what a deal would look like.
She is, I think, a brilliant and, pretty lucky politician. I mean, she navigates political waters better than really anyone, including Angus King, in my view. I mean, she does, like you said, take positions that don't please liberal interest groups, like introducing Jeff Sessions as the Trump nominee for Attorney General. Now, in my view, she has every right to do that. That's a personal decision, and she doesn't owe it to any, interest groups to not support someone she has personally observed in office for decades. But the fact that she is where she is, I mean, her star continues to rise. I think she's just going to gain in national prominence because she has good instincts and a good ability to somehow always make it to the table. She's always at the table.
She has good relationships, too, which I think
absolutely.
I don't care what anybody says, it's still critical, particularly when you're dealing with your own party.
Oh, yes.
But, she has, and that goes to the Jeff Sessions decision. I mean, this is a woman who puts a lot of value on personal one-on-one relationships and is loath to betray them. And I think that's an admirable quality. The question is, when it comes, she's putting out the markers now. Right. That's sooner or later she's going to face that very, very difficult moment where she's going to have to something that runs counter to every instinct she has, and that is to vote counter to her party. And it will be interesting. I have a lot of sympathy for the kind of pressure she will feel in a situation like that. But it's going to come. Yeah. And if she is going to be that one of three potential holdouts, that's not just rhetoric. At some point, she's going to have to cast a nay vote, and that's not going to be easy.
Well, I think in some ways she has changed the dynamics of the conversation, and she did it early, to her credit. I mean, here was a prominent Republican saying, I'm not going for repeal, standalone. Pretty clear. And I don't think she would have done that if she wasn't going to stick by it. So once you do that, you're stuck. But it signaled to all, the crazy people in Congress who were dreaming that, wow, we can finally just repeal this thing and wash our hands of it, that we're not doing that. We're not putting up with 20 million people potentially losing their health care.
I think
not going to happen.
I think back to Olympia Snowe during the initial passage of the ACA and how long and how convinced so many people were that she was going to be the one. Yeah. She was the only one. And she put out a lot of hints to that effect and raised a lot of expectations. But in the end, look what happened. And I think that demonstrates how hard it is, no matter what you say, how hard it is when that moment finally comes to actually cross that line.
When there's that reconciliation bill that you only need 50 votes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And are you going to be one of three people who
it's not a big defection.
Yeah, I think the pressure there.
No, I mean,
you don't need a big
numerically,
a lot of number of people, but so that makes it much harder
yes,
on the
exactly.
On the
anyway,
individuals.
she deserves a lot of credit for that.
I think she does. I agree.
She won't have to take that vote.
Well, that's the plan.
Because you can see all of the ripple effects happening with people saying, well, now, and even Trump says, what did he say last week? It was just outrageous. Like, we're going to have lower costs. Nobody's going to lose insurance.
Everybody's going to have insurance.
You're right.
Like, where do we sign up? Who's going to tell Tom
Universal health care at last.
He's going to be so disappointed.
Meanwhile, Republicans in the Congress are saying, you said what? You did what?
That's a good point, though. If you convince the nose counters that you're going to do something, that that could be the surest way to not have to do it.
They're all inching in that direction. I mean, they've really moved, I think, off the talk of repeal, and then later on, some years from now, we'll get to the.
Yeah.
I don't think
it was going to be election, or it was going to be inauguration day. He was going to have a bill to sign, and then they were saying by the end of January.
Yeah,
and now it's not.
They're not telling you what year.
Yeah,
this is where and this is where people sometimes don't appreciate about Susan Collins is that there was this initial bill on reconciliation to begin the process of repealing Obamacare, and she voted with her party. And some people thought that it's her talking out of both sides of her mouth, but. What people don't understand is if she wants her fellow Republicans to come along with her for this ride of reforming Obamacare, she needs them. So she has to vote with them. I mean, people don't get that this political process is this long road, and you have to kind of have your eyes on the road and also in the rearview mirror. And she is able, I think, better than a lot of people. Like, for instance, she never rises to the bait that Governor LePage, throws out there. He sends out these personal insults, and she always just keeps it about policy. And so we'll see. Maybe she'll be able to.
And continues to work with the state.
Yeah.
Right.
Bring resources
back home, I think we talked a month or two ago about the next gubernatorial campaign. And with Susan Collins, of course, if she enters on the Republican side, whole lots of people flee in all directions,
right. Yeah.
Including Democrats. And I remember we were talking about that, if Trump could win and they could hold the Senate, her power and influence in the Senate would actually increase. And under that circumstance, I certainly believe she would never.
Why would she want to become
governor? She
governor?
Would walk away from that in order to come back for run for governor. If, on the other hand, Hillary had won, Democrats had taken the Senate, she's in the minority, she loses the big office, you get the little office, I'm going home.
Yeah.
And I think this last thing with health care and the role she's playing now is sort of cemented in my mind that she's not coming back to run for governor.
I agree with you, Alan.
This is going to consume her for the next 2 years, without a doubt.
And good. I mean, she'll have maximum influence that she's been building.
So we get the free-for-all after all.
We get the free-for-all, which can be the topic of next week.
And who will she endorse in the 2000?
Well, I was
Senate
just going to say that. That's going to be really. She probably, my guess is that she's too careful, that she won't endorse either. And people will be all mad.
Unless Steve Abbott runs.
But that would be a big deal if she didn't endorse the Republican nominee.
And instead endorsed Angus King, who endorsed her.
Or didn't endorse anybody.
Yeah.
I mean, like she did for president.
Right, exactly.
I mean, people were disappointed. Some people were disappointed that she didn't endorse Clinton, but, she did not endorse the nominee of her party. That's a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, so that was a fun week. We'll get together again soon and figure out where we had been wrong.
Which is everywhere.
Probably everywhere, yeah.
Erase the whole thing.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening to the Portland Press Herald Podcast. Make sure you never miss a podcast episode by subscribing on iTunes or your favorite podcast aggregator. For more of our podcasts, visit pressherald.com/podcasts. Follow the link there to this episode to leave a comment. You can also leave a comment on our Facebook page. I'm Chad Gilley. Once again, thank you for listening to the Portland Press Herald Podcast.